For this section, we're going to look at rectangles, rhombuses, and squares. Remember, for rectangles, the defining property is that all four angles are equal. For a rhombus, we know all four sides are equal. And for a square, we know that all four angles are equal and all four sides are equal. Now, in a rectangle, the diagonals are congruent. In a rhombus, we know the diagonals are perpendicular. And then in a square, the diagonals are congruent and perpendicular. So it's basically a square is taking a rectangle and a rhombus and putting them both together. So in this one, I'm going to just show you what the sketch looks like here. So the sketch would look something like this if it was a rhombus, and we want to know if Q and S are congruent. Well, Q and S are opposite angles, and we know that opposite angles are congruent in a parallelogram. Since a rhombus is a special type of parallelogram, we can state that this is always true because every single rhombus has to have opposite angles congruent. So in this case, it would be always true. We want to know if Q and R are congruent. Well, in this case, if we drew a picture, Q and R are right next to each other. So this would be true with a square, and since a rhombus is not the same thing as a rectangle, this would have to be a square in order for this to be true. So if it was a rhombus with all four angles congruent, then we would know that it was true. It's not true all the time, so this would be something that would be sometimes true. And now we want to look at this and see what type of figure it is. We know that all four sides are congruent here. That makes it a rhombus. We can't state anything about it being a square, but we know this angle is not 90, so it's not a rectangle or a square. So in this case, again, it has four congruent sides. One of the angles is not a right angle, so it can't be a square or a rectangle. Therefore, it has to be a rhombus. And then if we have a rectangle, is it always or sometimes true that FG and GH are congruent? Let me draw a picture of this. If we were to draw a picture, and it's a good idea to draw a picture for all of these. If I write F, G, H, and E here, they're stating that FG and GH are congruent. Well, if it's a rectangle and these two sides happen to be congruent, we know it's also a parallelogram, so those sides would have to be congruent. And since it's a rectangle, we know these angles are congruent. So again, since these two are congruent, we know that all four have to be congruent. This would make it a square instead of a rectangle. Now, a square is a very specific type of rectangle, so that would make it sometimes true in this case. And it says we have a quadrilateral with four congruent sides and four congruent angles. Sketch the quadrilateral and classify it. If it has all four sides congruent and all four angles congruent, it would be a square. And we're done. Thanks.